The Hall of Famer nickname that was once tossed around sarcastically became a rallying cry. HOF. They'd say when Sanders made a no-look pass in red zone drills. HOF. They'd mumble when he threw a 45-yard laser off-platform into a tight window. The nickname stuck, not because of prediction, but because he made it feel real. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. When DraftKings released those jaw-dropping projections for Shedeur Sanders' NFL career, the football world didn't know what to do with it. Some fans laughed it off. Others embraced it like prophecy. But inside the Cleveland Browns facility, the mood was different. The projections didn't spark laughter. They sparked intensity. It wasn't about whether the numbers would come true. It was about whether Shedeur could shoulder the weight of that kind of belief and still deliver. Shedeur didn't flinch. If anything, the projections hardened his focus. Because when you're the son of Deion Sanders, outrageous expectations are constant. He'd been living under a microscope since he was old enough to throw a football. He understood the spotlight. He didn't run from it. He walked into it. The difference now was that the NFL spotlight was less forgiving. It didn't care about bloodlines. It cared about results. But Shedeur didn't come to Cleveland to be a novelty. He came to be a legend. His first few practices after projections went viral with the stuff of quarterback folklore. He arrived earlier, stayed later. Receivers started asking to work with him after hours. Linemen noticed how he took time to thank each of them after every rep. It wasn't performative. It was leadership in real time, the kind that didn't need to be taught, just revealed. In the locker room, the jokes started to fade. That was the thing about Shedeur. He made the impossible seem methodical. Head coach Kevin Stefanski tried to temper expectations publicly. He's a young guy. He's got a lot to learn, he told the media. But inside the team meeting room, Stefanski knew what he had. This wasn't just a rookie with potential. This was a quarterback who made the veterans sit up straighter, who made the fan base feel something they hadn't felt in decades. Belief. And that belief was contagious. Even the most hardened Browns fans, the ones who'd endured the jersey of shame with 30 failed quarterback names, began to whisper that maybe, just maybe, this kid was different. Not because DraftKings said so, not because of his dad, but because when Shedeur stepped on the field, it felt like gravity shifted. His mechanics were pristine. His footwork looked like it belonged to a 10-year vet. His command of the huddle was sharp, no hesitation, no second-guessing. In preseason walk-throughs, he corrected receivers on routes, called out blitzes before they came, and adapted protection on the fly. It didn't feel like someone learning the league. It felt like someone who'd already played in it. That's what impressed the coaching staff the most. He processed information like a computer. Every rep, every throw, every mistake. It got logged, corrected, and never repeated. His learning curve wasn't linear. It was vertical. The comparisons to past Browns quarterbacks became irrelevant. Shedeur wasn't the next Baker Mayfield. He wasn't a reboot of Deshaun Watson. He was his own prototype. And Cleveland was finally ready to stop looking backward. As for the locker room hierarchy, it shifted quickly. Kenny Pickett, the most experienced in the room, became visibly frustrated by the change in energy. He'd been brought in as a stabilizer, a bridge. But suddenly it felt like he was being outshined. Dylan Gabriel, the other rookie, quietly accepted that he was now third in the pecking order. And Joe Flacco, the grizzled vet brought in for stability, knew exactly what he was watching. Kids got it. Flacco said during film review one day, he's not just flashy, he sees it. That one sentence traveled fast through the organization. If a Super Bowl MVP quarterback is vouching for a rookie, people take notice. The internal buzz soon became external noise. Media outlets that once doubted him started flipping their tone. Analysts who criticized his draft slide began asking whether every team before Cleveland made a mistake. The same experts who said he wasn't a day one starter now debated whether he should be Cleveland's week one starter. Still, Shedeur didn't flinch. He stuck to plan, improve every day, earn everything. He wasn't chasing projections. He was chasing execution. But as much as he tried to keep it about football, the DraftKings numbers loomed in the background. They became a measuring stick. A specter, 62,804 yards, 454 touchdowns, 68.7% completion, 1 MVP, 1 Super Bowl, 7 Pro Bowls, a Hall of Fame jacket, and every throw he made in practice. Fans were watching with those numbers in their minds. The Browns' PR team leaned into it. They began to craft a narrative around "the future starts now." Posters of Shedeur went up outside the stadium. A local artist painted a mural of him on the side of a restaurant 2 blocks from First Energy Stadium. Kids started showing up to training camp in Sanders jerseys, not Deion's, but Shedeur's. And still, he hadn't played a single NFL down. That kind of pressure could break most rookies. But Shedeur, it sharpened him. He started holding player-only meetings, began texting teammates after practice with film clips and breakdowns. He even initiated weekly dinners with his offensive line, paying out of pocket and refusing to let anyone split the bill. "You protect me, I take care of you," he said. That wasn't rehearsed. It was instinct. As preseason rolled around, all eyes were on Shedeur. Would the hype translate to actual production? Would the flashes in practice show up against live defenses? Game 1 of the preseason, he got the second half reps. And in those 2 quarters, he looked like he'd been in the league for 3 years. He went 12 for 15, 143 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 third-and-long conversions that left the stadium roaring. His command was visible. His patience stood out. And when the defense threw disguised pressure, he stayed calm, shifted protection, and hit the hot read without flinching. It was clinical. It was cool. It was exactly what Cleveland had been waiting for. After the game, a reporter asked him what he thought about the DraftKings projection. He smiled, wiped sweat from his forehead, and said, "Man, I haven't done anything yet, but if you're going to write a story, write a good one." That quote went viral, and with it, Shedeur's mythology grew. Suddenly, the projections didn't feel outrageous. They felt possible. But here's the truth. Shedeur doesn't need to hit those numbers to be a success. He doesn't need the MVPs or even the Super Bowl ring to justify his presence in Cleveland. What he needs, what this franchise needs, is someone who gives them identity, who gives them hope, who gives them consistency. And if he gives them that, the stats will come. The accolade will follow. The Hall of Fame? Maybe that's in the cards. Maybe not. But legacy? He's already building that. Every pass, every read, every handshake with a kid in the stands. He's not just chasing greatness. He's creating it. By the time Shedeur Sanders even gets under center for a regular season snap, the atmosphere in Cleveland will already have shifted. That's what happens when a player arrives not just with a stat sheet, but with gravity, an undeniable pull that reshapes the energy of a franchise. Whether it's the practice reps, the sideline leadership, or the post-practice film sessions that stretch well into the night, Shedeur isn't waiting for someone to hand him the keys. He's building his own ignition. The most telling thing about Sanders is that his rise doesn't come at someone else's expense. It comes from within. He isn't begging for the spotlight. He's just doing the work. And yet, that very work is creating tremors through the depth chart. What started as a humble 5th-round pick is now becoming a challenge to the very structure of Cleveland's quarterback room. Dillon Gabriel, for all his accolades at Oregon, plays like a college quarterback trying to translate his skill set to the pro game. Quick reads, short passes, a bit of mobility, but the ceiling feels limited. Kenny Pickett, meanwhile, brings experience but not necessarily excitement. He's steady, maybe even solid, but in the NFL, steady without upside becomes expendable. It's a league built on stars, and that's where Shedeur begins to stand apart. He doesn't just have upside, he has vision. He doesn't just want to play, he wants to lead, and that's becoming clearer by the day. Ask anyone around the Browns facility, and they'll tell you the same thing. Shedeur's approach is different. He studies like a starter. He corrects himself before coaches even say a word. He's become a fixture in the locker room, not as a loud voice, but as a presence. He remembers teammates' names. He daps up staff members. He asks questions other rookies are too nervous to ask. It's the little things, the ones that separate professional from players just collecting a check. But the most important signal? His command of the offense. On the field, Shedeur doesn't flinch. The moment isn't too big. The schemes aren't too complex. He adjusts protections like a vet. He identifies defensive rotations before the snap. And when the pocket collapses, he doesn't panic. He resets his feet and delivers strikes. That's not normal for a rookie. That's foundational, which is why people are starting to whisper, not just in Cleveland, but across the league. Did everyone miss? Was Deion Sanders right? How did this kid fall to the 5th round? Because what we're seeing is a perfect storm. Talent, preparation, character, and hunger, all wrapped in a player who's been doubted every step of the way. The college analysts said he was a system quarterback. The scouts said he needed to prove it against better defenses. The GM said he wasn't NFL ready. And now, every single one of them is watching practice film in disbelief. This is no longer about potential. This is about production. Consistent, reliable, and dynamic production. And yet, what makes Shedeur's rise even more compelling is how he carries it. No arrogance, no entitlement, just quiet, unrelenting belief. The kind of belief that comes from being raised in locker rooms, from studying greatness up close. The kind of belief that turns a 5th rounder into the centerpiece of a franchise's future. The media is starting to catch up too. Beat reporters are shifting their tone. The questions are no longer about if Shedeur will play, but when. Former players are weighing in, some even calling for a trade to clear the way. One former Browns receiver recently said it outright. Move Kenny Pickett. Let Shedeur develop. He's already better than Gabriel. That's not a knock on Gabriel. It's a reflection of the reality unfolding on the field. Shedeur's reads are sharper. His mechanics are cleaner. His command is stronger. He throws a better deep ball. He understands NFL concepts at a higher level. And most importantly, his presence inspires belief. That belief isn't something you can fake. It's not marketing. It's not hype. It's the result of showing up every day and proving, over and over again, that you belong. And right now, Sheduer Sanders is doing just that. But what happens next is where the story really starts to turn. Because training camp is just a prelude. The real proving ground is the preseason. When the lights come on and the defenses stop pulling punches. When the reps count and the timing gets tighter. That's where we'll see whether this momentum carries forward. And here's the thing. People around the team already know it will. Because Shedeur doesn't just perform in practice. He performs under pressure. That's been true since high school, since college, since the spring game at Jackson State, when the media started paying attention, since the Colorado comeback games that had ESPN anchors changing their tone in real time. Pressure doesn't break Shedeur. It sharpens him, which is why fans are already circling the preseason games on their calendar, not to see the starters, but to see number 5, to see the future. Because if Shedeur plays the way he's practiced, if he commands the offense with the same fluidity and confidence, then the conversation changes overnight. No more questions about 5th-round picks. No more talk of development. It becomes a countdown. Not if, not even when, but how soon? And here's the wild card, the locker room. NFL teams don't just run on coaching decisions. They run on belief. And belief comes from players. From linemen who know when a QB gets them hurt. From receivers who know when the ball is late. From DBs who feel the fear in a quarterback's eyes. Shedeur isn't afraid. He never has been. And the locker room feels that. Already, veterans are quietly saying, this kid has it. That matters more than fans realize. Because once a quarterback earns the locker room, it's only a matter of time before he earns a starting job. So what does the future look like? If the projections hold true, if the development continues, Sheduer Sanders isn't just a quarterback for the Browns. He's a foundation, a centerpiece, a franchise reborn. Not just because he can throw a football, but because he understands a moment, because he embraces responsibility, because he plays the game the right way, and he leads with clarity. And if he gets there, if the career plays out the way DraftKings projected, Super Bowl, MVP, 62, 000 plus yards. Then this draft becomes a legend. The fifth round becomes folklore. The missed evaluations become cautionary tales. But none of that matters right now. What matters is the work, the grind, the reps, the hours in the film room, and the throws under pressure. That's where Shedeur is focused. Not on headlines, not on hype, just on football. Because that's how greatness begins. Shedeur Sanders walked into Brown's facility the Monday after his first preseason appearance, and something felt different, not just in the locker room, not just among the coaching staff. The whole building had shifted. Players who once offered nods now gave firm handshakes. Coaches who spoke in directives now asked questions. The cafeteria line buzzed with speculation, and even the media department was scrambling to adjust highlight reels and media packages. For a player who had once been buried on the depth chart, Shedeur had suddenly become the heartbeat of the organization. That's what happens when a player doesn't just perform, but elevates. In that first preseason game, Shedeur didn't just manage the offense. He lit it on fire. Against a veteran second-string defense, he went 12 for 15, threw for 2 touchdowns, ran for another, and orchestrated a 2-minute drill like he'd been doing it in the NFL for a decade. It wasn't just the numbers. It was the composure, the pocket presence, the confidence to throw into tight windows, the awareness to slide protections and shift formations. This was not a fluke. This was a blueprint. And more importantly, it was confirmation. Confirmation for every teammate who had quietly believed he was the guy. Confirmation for every coach who had been wondering how much longer they could justify keeping him off the first team. And most powerfully, confirmation for Shedeur himself that everything he had worked for, from the long practices to the overlooked draft slot, had not been in vain. The front office watched that game with tight jaws. They knew what it meant. Kenny Pickett's leash just got shorter. Dylan Gabriel's development arc just got steeper. And most uncomfortably, their previous plan just got torched. They weren't just evaluating players anymore. They were navigating a full-blown quarterback controversy, the kind that demands answers, not process. Andrew Hawkins, the former Browns receiver who had been calling for Shedeur to start, doubled down the next morning. On national TV, he said, "If you don't start him, you're playing scared. This kid isn't just ready, he's right now." His co-hosts tried to play it safe, but the numbers were too good, the tape too clean, the energy too electric. It was becoming harder and harder for anyone to say Shedeur wasn't the best quarterback on the roster. And it wasn't just TV. Browns fans lit up social media. Hashtags like #StartShedeur and #Primetime in Cleveland began trending regionally. Local radio callers weren't asking if he should start. They were demanding it. Season ticket holders were emailing the team. Jerseys that had been stuck in inventory for weeks suddenly started selling out. Even local reporters who had initially dismissed Sanders as a developmental project began changing their tune. But perhaps the most telling shift came from the locker room. After the second preseason game, a win in which Shedeur came in during the third quarter and led 2 scoring drives to ice the game, an anonymous veteran lineman told a reporter, "We play different when he's in there. That's our guy." That quote exploded across sports media. One line, 7 words, but a clear message. That's our guy. When a quarterback gets the locker room, everything else becomes noise. The pecking order, the contract history, the draft capital. None of it matters if the players believe. And in Cleveland, they believed. Still, the coaching staff held firm, at least publicly. Head coach Derek Wyatt told reporters after the game, "We like what we're seeing from Shedeur. He's progressing well, but no decisions have been made." It was the kind of carefully worded, PR-safe answer you'd expect. But inside the facility, things were far less ambiguous. Position coaches were adjusting installs to include more mobile quarterback options. Receivers were requesting extra reps with Shedeur during off days. Even the scout team began asking if they'd be running against number 5 more often. The tipping point came in the final preseason game. The coaching staff, maybe hoping to quiet the buzz, gave Shedeur a full first-half audition against a mix of starters and second-stringers. It was supposed to be a test. Instead, it was a coronation. From the first drive, Sanders took control. He audibled out a stack box on 2nd and 6, hit a hot read slant for a 12-yard gain. 2 plays later, he faked a jet sweep and dropped a 40-yard dime on the sideline, hitting his receiver perfectly in stride. The drive ended in a touchdown. So did the next one, and the one after that. By halftime, Shedeur had thrown for 211 yards, 2 touchdowns, and completed 16 of 19 passes. He had scrambled twice for first downs, drawn 2 offside penalties with his cadence, and orchestrated the offense with total command. When he jogged to the sideline at the end of the second quarter, fans in the stadium were already on their feet. That was the moment. The locker room erupted in support. Coaches exchanged long glances. Upstairs in the booth, executives weren't watching the plays. They were staring at each other, silently realizing what had just happened. The future had arrived. The next morning, the team announced its starting quarterback for Week 1, Shedeur Sanders. The city of Cleveland exploded with excitement. The press conference was standing room only. Reporters scrambled for questions. Shedeur, in a calm gray suit and crisp white sneakers, took the podium with his usual poise. "I'm grateful," he said, "but now the work really starts. This isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving the people who believed in me right." It was a simple line, but powerful, because in that moment, he wasn't just a starter. He was a leader. The Browns, for all their recent history of instability at quarterback, suddenly had clarity, not just on the field, but in their identity. They weren't the team trying to figure out anymore. They were the team rallying around a quarterback who embodied belief, preparation, and fire. As the regular season approached, Shedeur didn't retreat into comfort. He doubled down on the grind, first in the facility, last to leave, meeting with offensive line coaches, watching film with receivers, texting tight ends at 10:30 p.m. to review route concepts. This wasn't a moment for him. It was a mission, and the veterans noticed. Linebackers started staying later just to match his schedule. DBs volunteered for extra scout reps to help simulate tougher looks. The ripple effect of his leadership wasn't just energy, it was structure. It was accountability. When Week 1 finally arrived, the entire league was watching. Shedeur's debut was scheduled for Monday Night Football. National spotlight. Huge ratings. The opponent, the Pittsburgh Steelers, a division rival known for complex blitz packages and physical defenses. It was a baptism by fire, and Shedeur delivered. Final stat line. 24 completions on 31 attempts, 289 yards, 3 total touchdowns, 2 passing, 1 rushing, 0 turnovers. More importantly, the Browns won 27-20. In the post-game locker room, Shedeur gave the game ball to the offensive line coach, saying, "None of this works without protection. We're just getting started." The season had begun, and with it, a new era. The league took notice. Opposing defensive coordinators began designing entire schemes just to contain Sanders. Media outlets pivoted from skepticism to celebration. Former critics offered public mea culpas. Browns merchandise sales reached a historic high, and Shedeur kept stacking wins.